What is the true price of prejudice? For one senior flight attendant, a woman who ruled her airborne cabin like a personal fiefdom, the cost wasn't just her job or her reputation. The cost was a staggering $1.2 billion. This isn't a cautionary tale you hear in a corporate seminar. This is the story of how a single act of condescension, a dismissive wave of a hand aimed at the wrong woman on Flight 8117, caused an entire airline's expansion plan to vaporize into thin air. It's a story of quiet power, corporate collapse, and the devastatingly hard karma that follows when you mistake dignity for weakness. The ecosystem of Gate C-27 at Chicago O'Hare International was a familiar ballet of controlled chaos, and from her vantage point just inside the jet bridge, Brenda Jenkins was its unimpressed choreographer. For 28 years, the sky had been her office, the pressurized cabin her domain. Her once vibrant auburn hair was now a helmet of meticulously sprayed, salon-hardened copper. Her smile, once genuine, was now a lacquered tool, deployed with the precision of a surgeon and the warmth of a freezer door. As the lead purser for Apex Air's flagship transcontinental route, Flight 8118 to San Francisco, Brenda wasn't just a flight attendant. She was the sovereign of this aluminum tube. She surveyed the gathering flock in the terminal. The usual archetypes were there. The over-caffeinated tech bros in their fleece vests, already clacking away on laptops. The harried family with 2 toddlers threatening a meltdown over a dropped bag of fruit snacks. The anxious elderly couple triple-checking their boarding passes. Brenda's eyes, sharp and judgmental as a hawk's, scanned, categorized, and dismissed each of them. She wasn't paid to empathize. She was paid to enforce, to manage, to maintain the rigid order that kept 200 souls hurtling through the stratosphere without incident. Her authority was absolute, derived from FAA regulations and cemented by a seniority that made junior crew members tremble. Today, the flight was overbooked in coach, but, as was often the case on a Tuesday morning, first class had a few empty thrones. Seat 2A, a plush lie-flat pod with its own privacy screen and dedicated power outlets, sat tantalizingly vacant on her manifest. Company policy dictated it remain open for last-minute gate upgrades for their ultra-elite, obsidian-tier frequent flyers or for accommodating displaced crew. In Brenda's mind, however, it was simply her seat to bestow, a symbol of her power. It was a tool of reward for the compliant and a silent rebuke to the troublesome. The pre-boarding announcement for passengers with disabilities and active-duty military personnel crackled through the speakers. A few people shuffled forward. Then came the call for first class. The tech bros swaggered past, flashing their phones with a sense of entitlement that Brenda privately loathed but publicly pandered to. They were the ones who complained if the Wi-Fi was slow, but their tickets paid her salary. Just as the Zone 1 boarding group was called, a woman approached the podium. She was of average height, dressed in a simple but elegant pair of charcoal grey trousers and a soft, cream-coloured cashmere sweater. Her hair was styled in neat, professional braids that fell just past her shoulders. She wore no flashy jewellery, just a simple, classic watch on her wrist. In her hand, she held a boarding pass for seat 24B, a dreaded middle seat in the back of the plane. To Brenda's practiced eye, she was utterly unremarkable, another face in the endless river of passengers. The woman's name was Dr. Kendra Hayes. What Brenda could not possibly know was that Dr. Hayes was the founder and CEO of Vanguard Global Logistics, a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure and transport firm that was, at that very moment, in the final stages of negotiating a landmark partnership with Apex Air. The Phoenix Gateway project, as it was internally known, was a $1.2 billion deal to make Apex the exclusive air freight and corporate travel partner for Vanguard's massive new southwestern hub. It was the deal that was going to rocket Apex Air's stock into the stratosphere and secure CEO Robert Maxwell's legacy. Kendra, having just finished a grueling 3-day summit, was simply tired. She valued efficiency over fanfare and had booked her own economy ticket at the last minute through a standard travel portal. All she wanted was to get home, have a glass of wine, and sleep in her own bed. She waited patiently for a gap at the counter, and then addressed the gate agent, a young man named Peterson. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I see I'm in a middle seat. I know it's a long shot, but I noticed on the app that there appears to be an open seat in first class. Is there any possibility of a paid upgrade?" Peterson typed on his keyboard. "Ma'am, the flight is showing full. We are not processing any more upgrades at the gate." "I understand," Kendra replied, unfazed. "Perhaps on board, then, if it remains available? I'm happy to pay the full fare difference." Before Peterson could answer, Brenda stepped forward from the jet bridge door, her presence sucking the air from the immediate vicinity. She had overheard the exchange, and her internal sensors were already flashing. This woman didn't look like first-class material. The cashmere was nice, but it wasn't designer. The luggage was a practical, durable Samsonite, not a monogrammed Louis Vuitton. In Brenda's stratified world, the signals were all wrong. She saw a chancer, someone trying to talk their way into a luxury she hadn't earned. "We do not handle upgrades on the aircraft," Brenda said, her voice crisp and final. The statement was a lie. Discretionary on-board upgrades were rare but entirely possible, especially for a full fare offer. But it was her discretion. "You'll have to take your assigned seat." She didn't look at Kendra directly, instead glancing at her boarding pass with a dismissive flick of her eyes. 24B. That'll be toward the rear. Please have a pleasant flight." The dismissal was as swift as it was cold. Kendra felt a familiar, weary sting. It wasn't overt, but it was there. In the tone, the lack of eye contact, the immediate assumption that she didn't belong. She simply nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in her dark eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice betraying no emotion. She stepped aside and joined the queue for Zone 3, the quiet dignity of her posture a stark contrast to the institutional chill she had just received. Brenda watched her go, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. Order had been maintained. The throne of 2A remained empty, awaiting a worthier occupant. She turned back to the jet bridge, ready to command her kingdom, utterly oblivious to the fact that she hadn't just denied a seat upgrade. She had just lit the fuse on a billion-dollar bomb. The recycled air of the Airbus A321 hummed with the banal anxieties of travel. Passengers wrestled with oversized carry-ons, the scent of stale coffee mingling with a dozen different perfumes. Dr. Kendra Hayes made her way down the narrow aisle, her Samsonite rolling smoothly behind her. She found row 24, a tight squeeze between the wing and the rear lavatories, and offered a polite smile to the man in the aisle seat who grudgingly stood to let her in. As she settled into 24B, the grim reality of the next 5 hours set in. The seat was a narrow trough of stiff fabric, her shoulders already brushing against the large man to her right and the young student to her left, who had immediately put on oversized headphones. It wasn't the lack of comfort that bothered Kendra. She had endured far worse on cargo planes and dusty tarmacs while building her empire. It was the principle. It was the casual, unthinking exercise of power that she had just witnessed at the gate. The boarding process continued. Kendra saw Brenda Jenkins moving through the first-class cabin, her movements sharp and efficient. She laughed with a man in 3C, a silver-haired executive type, fluffing his pillow and personally taking his coat. She exuded a practiced, sycophantic charm, a performance reserved exclusively for those in the front of the plane. The curtain separating the two worlds was more than just a piece of fabric. It was a demarcation line in Brenda's mind between the worthy and the unworthy. Just before the cabin door was sealed, a young man in a wrinkled suit, clearly flustered and running late, was escorted onto the plane. Kendra watched as the gate agent spoke in hushed tones to Brenda, handing over a new boarding pass. Brenda nodded, her expression softening into one of welcome. She personally led the man to the front, gesturing grandly. To seat 2A. The throne now had its occupant. He was, Kendra noted with a detached sense of irony, a young, white man who looked like he had just graduated from college. He was probably an entry-level consultant with a mid-tier loyalty status, but in Brenda's eyes, he fit the part. The cabin doors closed. The safety demonstration began. Kendra tried to read a logistics report on her tablet, but her mind kept drifting back to the gate. It was a small thing, a minor indignity in the grand scheme of things, but her entire career had been built on understanding that small things, a single bolt in a turbine, a 1-degree deviation in a flight path, a dismissive tone from a customer-facing employee, were often symptoms of a much larger, systemic rot. About an hour into the flight, after the initial drink service had concluded in economy, Kendra felt a pressing need to stretch her legs. She unbuckled her seatbelt and made her way toward the front of the cabin, intending to use the forward lavatory, which was typically less busy. As she approached the flimsy curtain, Brenda materialized as if from nowhere, her body physically blocking the path. "The forward lavatory is for our first-class passengers," she said, her voice low but laced with steel. "I'm aware," Kendra replied calmly. "The aft lavatories are both occupied, and I just need a moment." "You'll have to wait," Brenda insisted, crossing her arms. Her polyester uniform seemed to bristle with authority. "It's our policy to maintain the integrity of the first-class cabin." The phrase hung in the air. Integrity of the cabin. It was corporate doublespeak for segregation. Sitting in seat 4D, a business consultant named David Miller, who had been trying to work, lowered his laptop screen. He had witnessed the brief exchange at the gate and now watched this new confrontation with growing unease. Kendra held Brenda's gaze. There was no anger in her eyes, only a profound, searching disappointment. "And what integrity is that, exactly?" she asked, her voice quiet, but carrying an undeniable weight. "The integrity that presumes a person's worth based on their seat number?" Brenda's face hardened. She was being challenged, and she didn't like it. "It's about providing the premium experience our top-tier customers have paid for. An experience free from disruptions." The final word was aimed like a dart, intended to frame Kendra as a problem, an intruder. A younger flight attendant, Jessica, emerged from the galley, her eyes wide with alarm. She saw the standoff and the simmering tension in her superior's face. "Brenda, the rear lavatory is free now," she offered timidly, trying to de-escalate. Brenda ignored her. Her focus was entirely on Kendra. This was no longer about a lavatory. It was a battle of wills. "Please return to your seat, ma'am." It was an order, not a request. For a long moment, the hum of the engines was the only sound. Kendra could have pressed the issue. She could have raised her voice, cited regulations, demanded to speak to the captain. She had brought down governments with less effort, but she chose a different path. She looked at Brenda, then glanced at the curtain, and finally at the uncomfortable faces of the first-class passengers who were now openly staring. She saw the system in perfect, ugly operation. With a slow, deliberate nod, she gave Brenda a look that was neither submission nor defeat, but something far more potent. Assessment. It was the look a master jeweler gives a flawed diamond just before deeming it worthless. "I understand completely," Kendra said, her voice perfectly even. "Thank you for clarifying your company's policy on customer value." She turned without another word and walked back down the aisle to the cramped confines of 24B. She didn't use the now vacant lavatory. She sat down, buckled her seatbelt, and pulled out her phone. She switched it to airplane mode, but first she opened a new email draft. The recipient was Alex Chen, her executive vice president of operations. The subject line was stark: urgent, Phoenix Gateway. In the body she typed a single chilling sentence: "Cancel my 10 a.m. meeting with Robert Maxwell of Apex Air. Suspend all negotiations on the Phoenix Gateway project, effective immediately. We are invoking Clause 14.7b, Values Misalignment. Find me a list of competitors to Apex by the time we land." She hit save. 5 hours later, upon landing at SFO, that email would be sent. The sound it made, a simple electronic whoosh, would be louder and more destructive than a sonic boom to the entire corporate structure of Apex Air. Up in the front of the plane, Brenda Jenkins, oblivious, began preparing the cabin for arrival, confident that she had successfully defended the integrity of her polyester-curtained kingdom. The 39th floor of the Apex Air Tower in downtown San Francisco was a monument to corporate optimism. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a godlike panorama of the bay, the Golden Gate Bridge a distant, perfect miniature. The air was scented with something expensive and vaguely citrusy. In the corner office, a space so large it could host a small wedding, CEO Robert Maxwell was practicing his golf swing. He wasn't hitting a ball, just tracing the elegant, powerful arc with a new titanium driver. The whoosh of the club head a satisfying sound in the quiet room. Robert was a man sculpted from the clay of corporate success. His silver hair was perfect, his suit was Italian, and his smile could disarm a hostile board of directors at 20 paces. Today, he was practically vibrating with triumph. In less than an hour, he was scheduled to meet the CEO of Vanguard Global Logistics to put the final signatures on the Phoenix Gateway contract. 1.2 billion, he murmured to himself, pausing his swing to look out at the city. The number tasted like victory. This deal wasn't just a contract, it was a transformation. It would create a new freight hub in Arizona, guarantee tens of thousands of corporate travel bookings annually, and give Apex an exclusive logistics partnership that would be the envy of the industry. It would cement his legacy and send the stock price into orbit. His bonus alone would be enough to buy a small island. His intercom buzzed. It was his executive assistant, a hyper-efficient woman named Patricia. "Mr. Maxwell, just a reminder that Dr. Hayes's car is scheduled to arrive at 9:45. We have the conference room prepped with the refreshments she requested." "Excellent, Patricia," Robert beamed. "No expense spared. Are the celebratory champagne flutes polished? I want this to be flawless." "Of course, sir." He had never met Dr. Hayes in person. The negotiations had been handled by teams of lawyers and VPs. He knew the Vanguard CEO was notoriously private, a self-made titan who had built a logistics empire from scratch. He'd seen a few photos online, a serious-looking black woman, often at shipping terminals or construction sites. He admired her grit, her mystique. In his mind, she was a fellow predator at the top of the food chain. He spent the next 20 minutes rehearsing his opening remarks, a carefully crafted blend of bonhomie and business acumen. He envisioned the handshake, the flash of the cameras from the trade press he'd invited, the smooth flow of his pen on the heavy signature page. At 9:50 a.m., the intercom buzzed again, but Patricia's voice had lost its crisp efficiency. It was laced with confusion. "Sir, Dr. Hayes is here." "Here?" She's early. Wonderful. Send her in, send her in, Robert said, straightening his tie and striding toward the door, his CEO smile already deployed. Sir, she's not in the lobby. She's on the phone. For you. She says she won't be coming up. Robert's smile faltered. A knot of confusion tightened in his stomach. A power play? A last-minute negotiation tactic? Put her through, he said, walking back to his desk and pressing the speakerphone button. Dr. Hayes, Robert Maxwell here. A pleasure to finally speak with you. Is everything all right? My assistant said you were downstairs. The voice that came through the speaker was calm, cool, and utterly devoid of warmth. Mr. Maxwell, I am indeed downstairs. I landed from Chicago about an hour ago on one of your aircraft, Flight 817. Excellent. I hope you had a pleasant flight, Robert said, the corporate platitude leaving his lips automatically. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, a pause so profound it felt like a vacuum. No, Mr. Maxwell, Dr. Hayes said finally. I did not. My flight was, in fact, deeply unpleasant, and it has given me a much clearer insight into the operational culture of Apex Air than any due diligence report ever could. The knot in Robert's stomach turned to ice. I don't understand. Was there an issue with the service? I can assure you, any lapse will be dealt with immediately. You pride yourselves on a facade, Mr. Maxwell, she cut in, her voice still quiet, but now sharpened to a razor's edge. Your company's values, the ones you print in glossy brochures, are not the ones practiced by your senior staff at 30,000 feet. Today, I was treated not as a customer, but as a nuisance. I was profiled, dismissed, and publicly condescended to by your lead purser for the crime of asking for an upgrade I was willing to pay for, and then barred from a lavatory because I was sitting in the wrong section of your plane. Robert was reeling, his mind racing to catch up. A bad flight? A rude employee? She was cancelling a billion-dollar meeting over that? Dr. Hayes, Kendra, I am utterly appalled. This is unacceptable. I will have that employee's wings. I will personally fire them. Please come upstairs. We can sort this out. I will offer you a lifetime of free first-class travel. A public apology. The response was swift and brutal. This isn't about a free flight, Mr. Maxwell. It was never about the seat. It's about the culture you've allowed to fester. A culture where employees feel empowered to pass judgment on customers based on their appearance. If that's how your people treat a passenger in plain sight, what does that say about your maintenance crews when no one is watching? What does it say about your baggage handlers, your schedulers, your entire operational chain? Vanguard's business is built on precision, respect, and unflinching integrity. We cannot, in good conscience, tether our brand and our future to a partner that demonstrates such a profound lack of it. Robert sank into his leather chair, the titanium driver forgotten in the corner. He could hear the echo of his own triumphant words from moments before, now mocking him. Therefore, Dr. Hayes concluded, her voice as final as a judge's gavel, consider this my official notification. Vanguard Global Logistics is terminating all negotiations regarding the Phoenix Gateway project. Our legal team will be in touch to formalize the dissolution of our preliminary agreements, citing Clause 14R7B. Goodbye, Mr. Maxwell. The line went dead. For a full minute, Robert Maxwell sat in stunned silence, the panoramic view of the bay suddenly looking like a portrait of his own failure. The only sound in the magnificent office was the faint, billion-dollar echo of a dial tone. The hours that followed the phone call were a blur of frantic, high-stakes damage control for Robert Maxwell. His first call was to his head of legal, his second to the chairman of the board. The news descended on the 39th floor like a nerve agent, silent and paralyzing. The word catastrophe was whispered in hushed tones. The trade press, who had been waiting in the lobby for a celebration, were quietly told the signing had been postponed due to a scheduling conflict, a lie so thin it was transparent. Robert locked himself in his office, his mind a maelstrom of disbelief and fury. $1 billion deal, the future of his company, undone by a flight attendant. It was absurd. It was inconceivable. He paced the length of his office, the plush carpet doing nothing to soften the hard reality of his situation. He had tried calling Dr. Hayes back 3 times, each call going directly to a polite but impenetrable voicemail. He needed more information. "Patricia!" he barked into the intercom. "Get me the full crew manifest and the passenger list for this morning's flight 8117 from O'Hare. And I want the purser's service record on my desk in 5 minutes. Her name. Find me her name." Minutes later, the file appeared on his screen. Brenda Jenkins, 28 years of service. A thick file, mostly clean, with the usual smattering of minor passenger complaints over 3 decades, but also a string of commendations for maintaining cabin order and adherence to company policy. She was a veteran, a company woman. Robert saw a history of rigid, by-the-book enforcement, but nothing that screamed racist firebrand. Then he found the passenger list. Dr. Kendra Hayes, seat 24B. His eyes scanned the first-class cabin. Seat 2A, the one that had been empty, was now occupied by a Jonathan Wright. He pulled up Wright's profile. A junior-level corporate traveler, silver status. His company had a minor travel account with Apex. There was no rational explanation for why he would have been given a complimentary upgrade over a passenger offering to pay full fare. Unless... Robert's stomach clenched as the ugly picture came into focus. Brenda Jenkins had made a judgment call, a purely superficial, prejudiced judgment call. He needed to fix this, not just for the deal, but for the impending firestorm. He imagined the headlines. Apex Air loses $1 billion deal over racist incident. The stock would plummet. The board would call for his head. He decided on a bold, desperate move. He called Patricia again. "Get me the address for Vanguard Global Logistics' headquarters, and have my car brought around. Now." 45 minutes later, Robert Maxwell, a man accustomed to being chauffeured to private airfields and exclusive clubs, found himself standing in the surprisingly understated lobby of the Vanguard building. It was a space of brushed steel, polished concrete, and quiet efficiency. There were no grand portraits or marble statues, only a large digital map of the world displaying thousands of moving lights, Vanguard's active shipping routes. He announced himself to the receptionist, who looked at him with cool, impassive eyes. "I'm Robert Maxwell from Apex Air. I'm here to see Dr. Hayes. I don't have an appointment, but it is a matter of the utmost urgency." He expected to be told to wait, to be sent away. Instead, after a brief phone call, the receptionist said, "Dr. Hayes will see you. Her office is on the top floor." As he rode the silent, high-speed elevator, Robert felt a sliver of hope. Maybe she was willing to talk, to negotiate. Maybe his grand, in-person gesture of contrition would work. He was led into an office that was the philosophical opposite of his own. It was spacious but functional, dominated by a massive, rough-hewn oak table instead of a desk. One wall was a screen displaying complex logistical data. The other was a window looking not out at a city skyline, but down at the bustling port of Oakland. Dr. Kendra Hayes stood by the window, her back to him. She had changed from her travel clothes into a sharply tailored navy blue pantsuit. When she turned, her expression was not one of anger, but of weary resolve. "Mr. Maxwell," she said, gesturing to a simple chair opposite the table, you've come a long way to receive the same answer. Dr. Hayes, I am here to offer the most profound and sincere apology of my professional life, Robert began, his voice laced with practiced humility. The actions of our employee were inexcusable, a flagrant violation of everything Apex Air stands for. She has been suspended, pending termination. I am here to ask you, what can we do to make this right? Kendra sat down, steepling her fingers on the oak table. There is nothing you can do, because you're asking the wrong question. You're trying to fix a symptom, Mr. Maxwell. I am concerned with the disease. It was one employee, was it? Kendra interrupted, her voice cutting through his excuse. Was it only one employee? Or was it the gate agent who deferred to her? Was it the junior flight attendant who saw what was happening and was too intimidated to intervene? Was it the first-class passengers who watched a fellow human being be humiliated and chose to look away because they didn't want to jeopardize their pre-departure champagne? Your employee wasn't an anomaly. She was the logical product of a corporate culture that prioritizes arbitrary rules and perceived status over basic human decency. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. My company moves 3 million tons of cargo every single day. We operate in 80 countries. My people, on the ground, face complex, high-pressure situations constantly. They have to make judgment calls that can mean the difference between a supply chain functioning and a factory shutting down. The one non-negotiable principle I have drilled into every single Vanguard employee, from the boardroom to the loading dock, is this. You judge people on their actions and their character, not on the color of their skin, the clothes they wear, or the price of their ticket. What I experienced on your flight this morning was the antithesis of that principle. Robert was speechless. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a lecture, a masterclass in corporate ethics. He was failing spectacularly. You see this as a PR problem, a financial loss, Kendra continued. You're thinking about stock prices and board seats. I see it as a fundamental misalignment of values. I cannot sign a contract that binds my company's reputation to yours for the next decade. I will not. The Phoenix Gateway project requires a partner we can trust implicitly. After my experience today, that partner is not Apex Air. She stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. I appreciate your gesture in coming here, Mr. Maxwell. It shows you understand the gravity of the situation. But you're trying to patch a crack in the hull of a sinking ship. My decision is final. Defeated, Robert Maxwell walked out of the Vanguard building. The sliver of hope had been extinguished. He had not been dealing with a disgruntled customer. He had been dealing with a force of nature, a woman whose principles were not for sale at any price. And he now understood, with chilling certainty, that the consequences for Apex Air were just beginning. The news of the Vanguard deal's collapse hit Apex Air's internal network like a shockwave. It couldn't be contained. By mid-afternoon, whispers had turned into panicked emails. By evening, a leak from a disgruntled vice president had reached the desk of an aviation industry blogger. The headline, posted just after market close, was brutal. Apex Air fumbles billion-dollar deal. Sources cite in-flight mistreatment of Vanguard CEO. Robert Maxwell's world became a triage unit. The stock was projected to open down at least 15%, wiping out hundreds of millions in market capitalization. The board had called an emergency session for the following morning, and the word ouster was being used without irony. His desperate last-ditch visit to Dr. Hayes had accomplished nothing but confirming the finality of her decision. Now, all of his fury, fear, and frustration needed a target. And that target was Brenda Jenkins. Brenda finished her San Francisco layover in blissful ignorance. She shopped, had dinner with another senior crew member, and complained about the new generation of entitled passengers. She arrived at SFO for her return flight to Chicago, feeling rested and in control. She was walking toward the crew briefing room when two stern-faced individuals in dark suits intercepted her. One was the regional head of in-flight services, a man she hadn't spoken to in years. The other was from corporate security. "Brenda Jenkins?" the manager asked, his tone devoid of any familiarity. "Yes, Charles. Is there a problem with the flight?" "There's a problem. We need you to come with us. Now." They didn't lead her to the briefing room. They led her to a small, windowless office in the airport's administrative wing. A laptop was open on the table. A third person, a woman from Human Resources, was waiting on a video call from headquarters. The atmosphere was glacial. "Brenda, please have a seat," the HR woman said from the screen. "We need to discuss an incident that occurred on your flight, 8:17, yesterday morning." Brenda sat, confused but still defiant. An incident? The flight was perfectly routine. "We have a formal complaint regarding your interaction with a passenger, Dr. Kendra Hayes," the HR woman continued, her voice a monotone. "The complaint alleges that you denied her a request for a paid upgrade, misrepresented company policy regarding onboard services, and publicly humiliated her by barring her from the use of a forward lavatory." Brenda scoffed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "That woman?" She was being difficult. She didn't accept the gate agent's answer and was trying to cause a scene. "I was maintaining order and following protocol to protect the integrity of the first-class cabin. It's my job." Charles, the manager in the room with her, slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of an email. "We have a witness statement, Brenda, from passenger David Miller in seat 4D. He's a premier-level flyer with us. His account differs significantly from yours. He describes your behavior as unnecessarily hostile and patronizing." Brenda's composure began to crack. A witness? He misunderstood the situation. I was professional and firm. "Did you or did you not tell Dr. Hayes that onboard upgrades were not possible?" the HR woman asked. "As a general rule, they aren't. It's discouraged," Brenda equivocated. "The rulebook explicitly states that pursers have the discretion to grant paid upgrades on board if seats are available to resolve customer service issues or generate ancillary revenue. You chose not to," the woman countered. "Then you gave a complimentary upgrade to passenger Jonathan Wright. On what basis?" "He was a late arrival. We needed to get him seated quickly." Brenda's voice trailed off. She knew how flimsy it sounded. The HR woman's face was grim. "Brenda, do you have any idea who Dr. Kendra Hayes is?" "Just another passenger in economy." The words came out with a venomous hiss. The final blow landed. "Dr. Hayes is the CEO of Vanguard Global Logistics. Apex Air was in the final stage of signing a $1.2 billion exclusive partnership with her company. As a direct result of your actions on Flight 817, she has personally cancelled that deal." The color drained from Brenda Jenkins's face. The number was so large, so astronomical, that it didn't compute. 1.2 billion. It was a phantom, an impossible figure. She looked from Charles to the security guard to the impassive face on the screen. She saw no sympathy, no room for appeal. She saw only the cold mechanics of corporate execution. "Due to the catastrophic financial and reputational damage your actions have caused Apex Air," the HR woman said, her voice like a final judgment, "and for gross misconduct and violation of our corporate code of conduct, your employment is terminated, effective immediately. The security officer will escort you to retrieve your personal belongings from the crew locker. Your flight privileges are revoked, and you will be escorted from airport property." Brenda stared, her mouth agape. 28 years, her whole life, her identity. Gone. Vanished in a sterile, windowless room because of one woman in a cashmere sweater. "You can't do this," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "I was following the rules. I have seniority." "You are not following the rules, Brenda," Charles said, his voice quiet but firm. "You are indulging your own prejudice, and your seniority doesn't grant you the authority to cost this company over $1 billion. It's over." The security guard stood up. Brenda felt a wave of vertigo, the world tilting on its axis. The throne she had guarded so jealously at 30,000 feet had crumbled into dust, and she was being purged, not just from the flight, but from the entire manifest of the life she had known. As she was led out, a disgraced queen deposed from her kingdom of polyester and recycled air, the only thought that echoed in her mind was a single, disbelieving name: Kendra Hayes. The firing was only the beginning of Brenda Jenkins's descent. In the hyper-connected world of the 21st century, secrets as explosive as the Apex Vanguard debacle have the shelf life of a snowflake in a furnace. Within a week, the story was everywhere. It started on niche aviation blogs, but the sheer scale of the financial loss, a story with a villain, a hero, and a price tag of $1.2 billion, was irresistible to the mainstream media. While Apex Air's official statements were choked with corporate jargon about re-evaluating partnerships and internal restructuring, the real story spread like wildfire online. David Miller, the consultant from Seat 4D, wrote a detailed, factual post on his LinkedIn profile about what he had witnessed. He never named Brenda, referring to her only as the lead purser, but he meticulously detailed the condescending tone, the lie about the upgrade policy, and the lavatory confrontation. He titled the post, "A $1 billion Lesson in Customer Service." It was shared over 100,000 times. Internet sleuths, armed with the flight number and date, did the rest. Within 48 hours, Brenda Jenkins's name and photo were circulating on Twitter, Reddit, and in the comments sections of news articles. She became a meme, a symbol of petty tyranny and self-destructive prejudice. She was Purser Karen, the $1 billion flight attendant. Her digital footprint was radioactive. Brenda retreated to her modest suburban condo, unplugging her phone and deleting her social media accounts. But she couldn't escape it. Her face was on evening news segments. Her neighbors whispered when she went to get the mail. Friends she had known for decades suddenly stopped returning her calls, not wanting to be associated with her infamy. Her professional life was annihilated. Being a flight attendant was the only career she had ever known. She assumed her 28 years of experience would count for something. She was wrong. She applied to every major airline, United, Delta, American. Her applications were met with a wall of silence. She then tried the budget carriers, Spirit, Frontier. One recruiter was blunt enough to tell her over the phone, "Brenda, your name is flagged in every aviation HR system in North America. No airline will touch you. You're uninsurable from a PR standpoint." Her savings began to dwindle. The severance package from Apex was insultingly small, negated by a clause about termination for gross misconduct causing material harm to the company. Her pride, a stubborn and foolish thing, kept her from seeking help. She sold her car, then started cashing out her meager 401k to pay the mortgage on her condo. The psychological toll was immense. She grew bitter, replaying the events of Flight 817 over and over in her mind. In her version, she was the victim. Dr. Hayes was an entitled troublemaker who had set her up. The world was unfair. She had been a loyal employee, and this was her reward. The cocoon of self-delusion was the only thing protecting her from the crushing reality that her own actions had authored her ruin. After 6 months of unemployment, desperation forced her to look for work outside of aviation. She applied for customer service jobs, a hotel front desk, a call center, a retail manager. In one interview for a position at a high-end department store, the hiring manager's eyes widened in recognition. "Wait a minute," he said, looking from her resume to her face. You're that flight attendant, aren't you?" Brenda fled the interview in shame. Eventually, the money ran out completely. The bank foreclosed on her condo. At 52 years old, Brenda Jenkins, the former Queen of the Skies, found herself moving her few remaining possessions into a cramped, one-room apartment above a laundromat. Her only source of income was a night-shift job, cleaning offices in a deserted downtown building. It was there that the karma of her actions hit its cruelest, most ironic crescendo. One night, her cleaning trolley laden with bleach and trash bags, she was assigned a new floor to clean. The 22nd floor of a sleek, modern office building. As she pushed her cart into the silent, sprawling office space, she saw the logo on the glass wall of the reception area, a stylized V with a globe at its center. Vanguard Global Logistics. She was cleaning the offices of the company whose deal she had single-handedly destroyed. Her job was to empty the trash cans, wipe down the desks, and vacuum the floors for the very people whose success was a constant, glaring reminder of her own failure. Some nights, she would see framed photos on desks, employees laughing at a company picnic, teams celebrating a successful project. They all seemed so happy, so professional, so much a part of something important. She never saw Dr. Kendra Hayes. The CEO worked on a different, higher floor. But every night, as Brenda scrubbed the floors on her hands and knees, the ghost of Flight 817 haunted her. The quiet dignity of the woman she had dismissed, the power she had so foolishly underestimated, the life she had lost. The throne at 30,000 feet had been traded for a mop and a bucket in the dead of night. It was a long, silent, and complete fall from grace, a private punishment for a very public sin. While Brenda Jenkins was learning the harsh geography of rock bottom, the financial world delivered its own brutal verdict on Apex Air. The morning bell at the New York Stock Exchange was not a call to business, but the sound of an executioner's drum. When APX appeared on the ticker, it was beside a down arrow steeped in crimson. The stock didn't just dip, it cliff-dived. The 17% drop in the opening minutes was a bloodbath, a shareholder panic that vaporized nearly $500 million of the company's value before Robert Maxwell had finished his first bitter cup of coffee. His emergency board meeting was not a conference of peers, but an inquisition. The long, polished mahogany table felt like a witness stand. The faces of the board members, once allies in the pursuit of profit, were now a grim jury. Robert, stripped of his usual swagger, stood before them not as a leader, but as a defendant. He presented his desperate plan for salvation, a mandatory, company-wide cultural and sensitivity retraining program, a multi-million-dollar initiative designed to signal a profound corporate repentance. It was a hollow gesture, a PR strategy masquerading as a cultural revolution, but it was all he had. He promised accountability. He pledged a new era of inclusivity. He sacrificed his entire annual bonus on the altar of corporate survival. Reluctantly, narrowly, the board granted him a stay of execution. His job was safe, but his authority was shattered. He was now a CEO on probation, forever managing the fallout of a crisis he had allowed to fester in the dark corners of his company. The retraining program, titled Ascend with Apex, was rolled out with much fanfare. It was an online, interactive module, filled with insipid stock photos of diverse, smiling actors posing as employees. It was a labyrinth of corporate jargon, of multiple-choice questions with painfully obvious answers. For the 40,000 employees of Apex Air, it was a joke. Pilots clicked through the slides while waiting for clearance on the tarmac. Gate agents completed the quizzes between boarding calls. Flight attendants, resentful and overworked, shared answers in crew lounges. The program taught them the correct words to use, but it did nothing to change the underlying culture of hierarchy and cynicism. The rot remained, now concealed beneath a thin, glossy veneer of compliance. Dr. Kendra Hayes, meanwhile, operated with the surgical precision that had built her empire. She viewed the Apex debacle not as a setback, but as a crucial data point. Her search for a new partner became an audit of corporate character. She took a meeting with Garrett Vance, the old-school CEO of Transcontinental Airways, one of Apex's oldest rivals. They met in a stuffy, wood-paneled club that smelled of leather and legacy. Garrett, a man with a booming voice and a handshake designed to crush knuckles, was effusive in his condemnation of Apex. "Can you believe it, Kendra? Some jumped-up stewardess," he'd chuckled, completely missing the point. "We'd never let that happen. Our people know who butters their bread." He talked about market share, freight capacity, and quarterly growth. He saw the Phoenix Gateway as a prize to be won from a fallen competitor. He never once mentioned values, principles, or people. Kendra listened politely, thanked him for his time, and knew within 10 minutes that Transcontinental was a non-starter. They were just Apex Air in a different uniform. Her next meeting was with Stellara Air. The difference was immediate and palpable. Their headquarters wasn't a monument to power, but a campus designed for collaboration, with open spaces, natural light, and a notable lack of corner offices. Their CEO, Maria Fuentes, was a dynamic woman whose energy seemed to fill the room. She began their conversation not with a pitch, but with a question. "Dr. Hayes," she said, leaning forward with genuine curiosity, "tell me about the culture at Vanguard. What do you look for in your people?" For 20 minutes, Kendra spoke, and Maria listened. Then, Maria told her about Stellara's Dignity First policy. She didn't just name it, she gave an example. She recounted an incident where a flight crew had dealt with a disruptive and verbally abusive passenger, not by calling security, but by calmly and respectfully de-escalating the situation, validating his frustration while holding a firm line on behavior. The purser on that flight was later given a bonus, not for enforcing a rule, but for resolving a conflict with grace. "Our brand," Maria explained, "is not the logo on the tail of the plane. It is the character of the person wearing our uniform. We hire for character first and train for skill second." In that moment, Kendra knew she had found her partner. It wasn't just a business alignment, it was a philosophical one. The deal they structured was bigger and bolder than the one with Apex. Worth $1.5 billion, it included not just freight and travel, but a joint investment in developing sustainable aviation fuels and a tech-share program to streamline logistics from the warehouse floor to the cargo hold. 3 months later, the flashbulbs of the press conference illuminated a new alliance. Kendra and Maria stood side by side, a united front of modern leadership. A reporter from a major financial journal asked the inevitable question, "Dr. Hayes, your previous negotiations with Apex Air collapsed spectacularly. Why are you so confident in this new partnership with Stellara?" Kendra stepped to the podium, her presence commanding the room's attention. "Vanguard moves the world's most valuable goods," she began, her voice calm and resonant. "But we have learned that the most valuable asset in any business isn't listed on a stock exchange. Its integrity, its character. Apex Air tried to solve a deep cultural problem with a training module. They addressed the symptom. Stellara Air, by contrast, has built its entire operation on a healthy foundation of respect. We sought a partner who understands that their culture is their most critical piece of infrastructure. In Stellara, we found that partner. The statement landed with the force of a perfectly executed closing argument. It was a masterclass in professional shade, a clear and devastating indictment of her former would-be partners. The Phoenix Gateway would rise, its wings flown by an airline that understood that true ascent begins on the ground, with how you treat people. In the months that followed, the three central figures of the saga settled into their new realities. Robert Maxwell sat in his 39th floor office, the stunning view now a bitter reminder of his diminished stature. He would stare at the daily stock report, the APX ticker stubbornly refusing to climb back to its former glory, a permanent scar on his legacy. Late one night, in the deserted Vanguard headquarters, Brenda Jenkins pushed her cleaning cart across the polished concrete floors. She paused to wipe down the glass wall of a large conference room. Inside, taped to the wall, were blueprints and logistics charts for a massive new project hub. At the top, in bold letters, was the title, The Stellara Vanguard Phoenix Gateway. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, a tired, anonymous woman in a janitor's smock, forever on the outside, looking in at the world she had broken. And Dr. Kendra Hayes, on her way to Arizona to break ground on the new hub, sat in seat 2A of a Stellara Air flight. The flight attendant, a warm and engaging young man, had welcomed her aboard by name. As the plane climbed through the clouds, Kendra looked out the window at the endless expanse of blue. She felt no sense of triumph, no thrill of victory. Instead, she felt a quiet, profound satisfaction. She hadn't sought to punish or to ruin. She had simply refused to accept a world that did not align with her values, and by doing so, she had built something better in its place. The story of Flight 8172 is a stark reminder that the biggest consequences often stem from the smallest moments of choice. A single decision, fueled by prejudice, set off a chain reaction that cost a company a fortune and an employee her entire way of life. It's a powerful illustration that in our interconnected world, there is no hiding from the repercussions of our actions. The karma was not mystical or magical. It was direct, financial, and devastatingly real, delivered not by fate, but by the quiet, unyielding power of a woman who knew her own worth and the worth of the principles she stood for. If you believe that character is non-negotiable and that integrity should always win the day, please give this video a thumbs up to help it reach more people. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories where karma delivers the final, unforgettable verdict. Thank you for listening.